Hello, everybody. Welcome back to week two of our Intro to the Study of Politics class. Uh, Today, I will finish what's left over from last week's lecture, only a small part right there under advantages, disadvantages. I'll finish that. And then we will start a new segment on political ideologies. All right? Okay. So here we go. Let's start with our lecture. So, what are the advantages and disadvantages of the scientific method or the statistical method, if you prefer? So let's start with the advantages. Okay? One of the main advantages of this method is that it lends the social science discipline exactness and concreteness. In other words, it makes the social science discipline more measurable, more testable. Okay? The social science discipline is a very soft discipline. Our concepts are very fuzzy and weak. As I mentioned before, every social science scientist can and will define a concept differently. For example, there are so many different definitions of terrorism, so many different definitions of democracy, so many different definitions of love. So this method allows our discipline to become more concrete and more exact. Second advantage, it's replicable. It makes the work of social scientists replicable. Other researchers can look at your work and replicate what you did. Okay? They can say, all right, I went through the same process that Dr. Dahi went in his research, and I found the same results. All right? Provided Dr. Dahi was concrete and exact in his definitions and was concrete and exact in the selection of variables and indicators. Okay? Number three, we can, using this method, establish very decently strong relationships or correlations between the variables, provided we have a large number of cases. All right? We know, for example, as I showed you last time, that there is a significantly moderately strong relationship between the degrees that a person holds and whether they vote or not. This is a well-established, moderately strong relationship. Okay? Nobody is going to argue the opposite of this. All right. So these are the advantages in general of the statistical or or scientific method if you prefer that name. What are the disadvantages? Number one, sometimes you do not have the statistical data needed to conduct statistical analysis. Basically, as the title suggests on our lecture outline, we have a small number of cases, the small n problem. We do not have enough cases to conduct statistical analysis. Last time when I talked to you about this problem, I mentioned the problem with the study of revolution, where revolutions can be counted on two hands, pretty much. And that doesn't give you a lot of cases to conduct statistical analysis. So what do you do? What do you do when you don't have a large number of cases? Do you give up and not study the subject matter? No, you do historical analysis. You do case study analysis. All right? Second problem is the hard to quantify problem. Sometimes some variables are very hard to quantify, very hard to measure, like the variable of love, as I mentioned before, the variable of power. How do you measure power? Okay? The variable of terrorism. How do you measure terrorism? Do you say terrorism is an act of a group and thereby exclude state-sponsored terrorism? How do you measure terrorism? Or is it one of those of I will know it when I see it? Okay? Next issue or a disadvantage is this one. Reliability. What does that mean? Write it down. Are the indicators that we use to measure the variables reliable? What does that mean? Reliable means that they should produce similar results when used by different researchers. Okay? So different researchers should produce similar results of reliability. Example, a presidential approval rating. This is very reliable. Presidents have a presidential approval rating, and the question that is asked by many different researchers of the public, do you approve or disapprove of the way the president is doing his job? And generally speaking, all these measures move in a similar number. Okay? Example, by the end of his term, President Trump had a measure of approval rating that was between 29 to 35%. Okay? That means that the measure of presidential approval rating used by different researchers is pretty much reliable. Clear? Next up, another issue. Is the measure that we are using valid? is the measure that we are using valid? In other words, does the measure that we use, the indicator that we use, measure what we think it measures? Or is it measuring something else? Give you an example of an invalid measure. Well, during the Vietnam War, researchers said to themselves that to measure success in the war, so the variable was success in the war, we will use an indicator of the number of Viet Congs killed in action. Okay? And every night on the TV media channels, they would recite that number. The U.S. killed so many Viet Congs. Well, it turns out that the United States was killing more and more and more and more and more Viet Congs, but the U.S. was not winning the war. In fact, the U.S. ended up losing the war. The United States did not succeed. So the measure, number of killed Viet Congs, was not a valid measure of success in war. Do you understand that? This is important to know. Validity. Is the measure being valid? Another invalid measure is using IQ tests, using SAT tests, using GRE test, graduate record exam, these entrance exams that they do, to measure predicted success or intelligence. Again, are these valid measures? Do they work when they are conducted in different cultural settings? Okay? Finally, the issue of comparability. This is point 5 on your lecture outline. Comparability. Are the indicators, the measures that we are using, comparable across many different countries? Comparable across many different countries. For example, let's say we were measuring healthcare in a society by using only one indicator. And that indicator was doctors per population. Okay? Again, if we use that one indicator, it is not comparable when we are measuring healthcare in less developed countries. Let me tell you why. In less developed countries, there is this concept known as the brain drain. Brain drain. Here's what happens. In less developed countries, the government will train and invest a lot of money in graduating doctors. Okay? Not doctors like me, actual doctors. I'm a fake doctor. All right? So they invest a lot of money in that. But once these doctors graduate, they discover, because they are economically rational, that they can make way more money when they immigrate to European countries, the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. They'll make more money there than they would in a less developed country. So what they do is, once they finish their coursework and they go do their residency in a hospital overseas, they never come back. Brain drain. So instead of that, less developed countries started investing in less expensive ways to promote health. They started investing in paramedics. They started investing in midwives. So, to get an accurate measure of health, you don't use only doctor per population, you add midwives per population, nurses per population, paramedics per population. You dig? Do you understand the concept of comparability? All right. So I will stop here because that ends this section, and then we will start with the next section. All right. So now we begin with a new section. The section for week 2 is a section on political ideologies. All right. As you can see, the lecture outline is to my right, and below my video image is a table that summarizes each one of the main political ideologies: conservatism, classical liberalism, and socialist political ideology. You will find this table on my website on writeitdownprof.com under Political Science 200 links. Okay? So you can find it there so you can study it for your exam. Okay, so we begin. What is a political ideology? Write it down. A political ideology is a comprehensive set of beliefs about the political world based on assumptions that we make about human nature. Okay? So it's a comprehensive, all-encompassing set of beliefs about the political, social, economic world around us based on assumptions about human nature. All right. Each one of the political ideologies that I mentioned, conservatism, classical liberalism, socialism, each one of these articulates an aspect of the human condition. So, what are these aspects of the human condition? Number one, first aspect of our miserable existence on this earth. Number one, we are mortal. Mortality. We are all going to die, and we know it. Some of us try the impossible to stay young, but we are all going to die. As disappointing and as depressing as this is a fact. So mortality is part of the human condition. To alleviate, to reduce that impact of this idea on us, what do? We seek to give spiritual meaning to our existence. We hope I don't offend you, invent God. We invent religion. We invent multiple religions. We invent spirituality. We invent an afterlife. We invent coming back again. All of these methods that we engage in are meant to alleviate the fear of mortality. Because, make no mistake about it, we are all going to die. Except me, I'm going to live forever. Just kidding. Okay. So that's one aspect of the human condition. Second aspect of the human condition is sociability. Sociability. You've heard the saying before, we are social animals. We choose to live together in a society. We choose social interaction. Just to give you an example, because of the pandemic and the lack of social interaction, data indicates that there are a lot of people having mental issues of depression, of isolation, of loneliness. Do you understand? We are social animals. We choose to live with others and interact with others. And if we can't do that for a sustained period of time, we get mentally ill. Number three, or the third aspect of the human condition, is individuality. Individuality. Each person, despite wanting to live in a society, seeks to express their individuality from the collectivity that they live in. Okay? We express our individuality in a capitalist society by the type of clothing we wear, by the type of piercings we do, by the type of tattoos we put on our bodies, by the type of cars we drive. All of these are expressions of individuality. Clear? All right. Write it down. Each aspect of this human condition is expressed by three distinct political ideologies. So let's begin. We will begin by the conservative political ideology. As you notice on the table, the first item is human nature. Okay? This is very important. Write it down. Every political ideology that is worth something begins with a view on human nature. What is the view on human nature? And that's where we will begin with conservatism. Conservatives believe that humans are irrational, uncooperative, dare I say, evil, left to their own devices. Human beings will kill each other. Life, as Hobbes tells us, Thomas Hobbes, who is probably the foremost conservative, life is nasty, brutish, and short. Okay? This being the case, write it down, there is a need for a strong authoritative structure to regulate human behavior. That strong structure can be the state, the government, the army, the military, the police, the court system, or it could be the church, the mosque, the synagogue, religious institutions. But conservatives believe there should be a strong authoritative structure to keep human beings in line, to keep human beings on the straight and narrow, so to speak. Conservatives do not believe that human beings are born equal. Indeed, at the core of conservative ideology is that we are born unequal. Some of us are endowed by our Creator with higher faculties than others. Some of us are more athletic. Some of us are more artistic. Some of us are more intelligent. Therefore, inequality, and with inequality comes hierarchy, are inevitable. Do not even bother to try and alleviate inequality. Okay? In other words, to bring it to you in modern parlance, Elon Musk is the wealthiest man in America, not because he had privileges that some of us didn't have. He was raised in a semi-wealthy family in South Africa. He was afforded good schools, etc., etc. Not because of that, but because he is endowed with better faculties than the rest of us. Do you understand? All right. Write it down. Conservatives believe in a market capitalist economy. Why? Well, because a market capitalist economy produces winners and losers, produces hierarchy, produces private property, produces leaders and followers. And that is why conservatives respect a market economy and respect private property. Because of their view of human nature. Uncooperative, evil, capable of killing each other. Conservatives believe in symbols that garner respect among the masses. They believe in a church that is respected. They believe in the flag that should be respected. They believe in standing up and taking your hat off during the national anthem. You understand? And finally, when it comes to change, if there is to be change, okay, then that change should be slow and superficial, not radical and deep. I'll give you an example. Remember, we talked about the issue of health care in the United States, how we spend the most and get the least. The outcomes are not commensurate with the spending. What do conservatives want to do? Something minor, tinkering along the margins. Believe it or not, the Affordable Care Act that was passed under Obama was a conservative idea. Yes? It was implemented by now Senator Mitt Romney when he was governor of Massachusetts. He's a Republican. And Obama took that idea from Massachusetts and applied it to the United States of America. It's a conservative idea. A total change idea would be this: take Medicare, the one that we have now, which is health care for the elderly, paid for by an insurer known as the government of the United States, right? So the government gives the elderly a card, the elderly person goes to the doctor, private doctor, gets whatever treatment that he or she needs, and then the doctor bills the government. That's the way they do it in Canada. That's the way they do it in many other countries. But we only do it for the elderly in this country. So a radical, total change approach would be take Medicare and slowly expand it to cover everybody. Now it covers people who are 64 and above. Expand it to 60, expand it to 55, expand it to 50, slowly, and then you got everybody covered. Okay? The next item that we're going to talk about is classical liberalism. Okay? Classical liberalism. All right. But before we move into classical liberalism, just let me point out some political theorists who are associated with conservatism. First and foremost, a British philosopher by the name of Thomas Hobbes. Thomas Hobbes. He wrote a famous book called the Leviathan. Okay? Another important philosopher before him was the Greek philosopher known as Plato. He wrote a very famous book called Plato's Republic. And yet another philosopher that you should also look at if you are interested in conservatism is Edmund Burke, a British philosopher who was writing at the time of the French Revolution and was horrified by what the French Revolution did. Okay? All right. Now, I want to warn you when we talk about liberalism. When we say liberalism in our context, we are talking about classical liberalism. We are not talking about American liberalism. Okay? In modern American equivalent, we will be talking about libertarianism. All right? When we say classical liberalism, the modern American equivalent of classical liberalism would be libertarianism. Okay? Got it? All right. So as before, we begin with human nature. What do classical liberals believe when it comes to human nature? Write it down. Human beings are good, logical, rational, capable, human beings can manage their own affairs. Okay? They do not need a state or a church to guide them. Therefore, according to libertarians, the state should be weak, should be minimal, and should not interfere in economic or personal affairs. Okay? If you want to use drugs, it's your choice. You live with the consequences. The state should not regulate your behavior, should not tell you what to do and what not to do. Next up, libertarians or liberals, classical liberals, support a free market economy with almost no state intervention. Okay? Why do they adhere to this free market fundamentalism, if you will? They adhere to it in part because it allows individuals who are capable to achieve their highest potential. Okay? So the market, the free market, becomes a vehicle for achieving your potential. On top of that, classical liberals Libertarians also believe that private property is inalienable, sacrosanct. You cannot take people's property from them, even if it is taken for the public good, like building a freeway, like building a park, like building public transportation that benefits the many. Okay? Private property is inalienable. For example, you know that former President Trump wanted to build a wall on the US Mexico border. The wall didn't even get built. Probably they built like what, 6 or 10 miles of it out of like 600 or so. Don't quote me on the numbers, but very minimal amount was built. But the point is that the federal government needed to take the private property of others on the border in order to build that wall. Libertarians, classical liberals, will be horrified by that because private property is inalienable. You cannot take it. It is one of our God-given rights. Right to life, right to liberty, right to property. Yeah, I know. In our Constitution, they took property out and they put pursuit of happiness. But all of these founding fathers knew what was meant by pursuit of happiness. It was a substitute for the word property. All right. Moreover, classical liberals, libertarians also believe that the individual is more important than the group that they belong to. Okay? So your rights as an individual are superior to the rights of the group. Your right to own a firearm is more important than the right of the community to be safe from you in case you go crazy and use the firearm to kill many in the community. Your right to a firearm is more important than the safety of the community from firearms. Okay? Because the state is supposed to be weak, libertarians also believe that its symbols are supposed to be weak. So for libertarians, the flag is not that important. It's just, for them, a piece of cloth. Okay? A libertarian for example, will have no problem with an individual burning the flag because your right as an individual to burn the flag supersedes the importance of the flag to the community around you. Libertarians do believe in change, but only if this change leads to higher individual achievement. Okay? So, yeah, we would like to change society, but only if it means that it brings better opportunities and better abilities for the individual to achieve. Finally, libertarians, just like their conservative brethren, do not have a problem with inequality. They don't see income and wealth inequality in a society as a problem. Why? Well, because it is the result of individual achievement through the marketplace. Libertarians, for example, will not be horrified if you tell them there are 3 Americans, 3, who have more wealth than 50% of all Americans. Who are these 3? You guessed it, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and the former founder of Microsoft, Bill Gates. They won't be horrified by that. Finally, who are the political theorists that are associated with classical liberalism? Who are they? Well, let me give you a few names. John Locke was one of them. Adam Smith was another. And John Stuart Mill was yet another. Of course, you can add to the list many others, like economist David Ricardo, if you like. So, we have now covered two schools of thoughts, the conservative and the liberal. So we're almost at 1 hour in terms of lecture, 54 minutes and a half. And on this fine note, I will tell you bye-bye.